Hi there, and welcome to the Stump. The video you're going to watch here is a interview with Commissioner of Public Lands candidates. There is no inherent or implied endorsement of any of these candidates, but given the role of this position in forestry here in the state of Washington, and quite honestly, a lack of understanding of what the role does in the larger population of the state, I felt it was important to try to get information out about who these individuals are. I have two interviews that are going live here today. I identified who the top five candidates were that I considered the most likely to advance beyond the primary. And three of those did not respond to requests for interviews. So please join me, though, in learning more about the two individuals you will see in the video preceding this little intro. There are two individual not chapters, episodes, one for each of the two individuals I interviewed. Thank you, and have a great day. All right, so welcome to The Stump, a podcast where I cover various forestry issues, career and personal development, and really anything that comes across my mind. I'm your host, Matt Comiskey, and today we have Sue Pedersen, candidate for Commissioner of Public Lands in the state of Washington, joining us. And so this position, for those of you out there that don't know about it, it leads the Washington State Department of Natural Resources, which is a really kind of six agencies within one title. So it's a really diverse agency, to everything from the regulatory side to revenue production and aquatics and all of that. So welcome, Sue. Glad you could join us. So yeah, I mean, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, maybe why you want to be the next Commissioner of Public Lands.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Matt. Well, my background is I grew up at a salmon hatchery down on the Columbia River, the Little White Salmon Fish Hatchery. We were right next to the very large 1.3 million acre Gifford Pinchot National Forest. So my little community there was the hatchery kids and the loggers kids. It was very oriented towards the outdoors and natural resources. I grew up having tons of freedom to explore nature, hike all over the place and figure out how nature is organized, basically. And my love of nature was what attracted me to a degree in biology. So I have a degree in biology from Western Washington University. I had an incredible career, which I totally enjoyed, in various fields of natural resources. I started out doing salmon migration research at the large Columbia and Snake River dams. I worked for mostly the Army Corps of Engineers at the large Columbia and Snake River dams, where we would tag adult salmon with radio tags and follow them with directional antennas and radio receivers and watch where they go as they approach these dams, pass up over a fish ladder, whether they fall back or not. And sometimes we would follow them between dams. It was fascinating. It was seasonal work, so I was able to do that at the same time that I was paying my way through college. Because I have two older sisters who were both in college. We were only 3 years apart. I was the youngest. And so I had to work my way through. It took me a little longer, but I felt so lucky to have that kind of experience while I was earning money for college. After college, my first job after I graduated was to go out to the Gulf of Alaska as a U.S. observer on Japanese stern trawlers fishing for rockfish. And it was an amazing job. I was just out at sea for several months the only English speaker, the only woman on this boat full of Japanese fishermen.
Oh my goodness.
It was really, really mostly an exercise in isolation, I guess. But here's what I loved about it. I got to sample their catches, and I had to key out. All of my colleagues were sent to the Bering Sea, and they did pollock fisheries, and they had like 99.9% pollock in their catches. But I had pages and pages of organisms that I keep because they're fishing on the bottom, and so they'd get everything. We'd get corals and sponges, even
Oh wow.
all these amazing organisms. And I got to key them all out. And I came home with a huge report. My colleagues all had like a few pages, and I had hundreds of pages of species that I had identified. That was quite an experience. Uh, I uh, I I started working on um, juvenile migration at the dams, same dams, Columbia and Snake River dams. I worked for a private sector research firm that also manufactured high-tech sonar gear. The name of the company was Biosonics. They were located in Seattle, but uh, they figured out a way to study juvenile fish, salmon, going downstream over those same dams. So we would go, that was a job that required a lot of travel. I actually worked all over the US and down in Argentina and Paraguay. We would attach these transducers to a dam, sometimes a nuclear power plant. We could estimate how many fish were using certain areas in a river. And that was fascinating. So I did that for maybe 9 years. Then I had a daughter. I became a mom, and I couldn't travel so much. So I got a job then. It's amazing to me that I got to do so many cool things. My next job was the fisheries manager for salmon harvest in Puget Sound, non-tribal. So I managed the purse seine and gillnet fisheries in Puget Sound during the fishing season, and that was fascinating too. From there, that was with the State Department of Fisheries, that's now called Fish and Wildlife. From there, I became a habitat manager, and I was the manager for all of Kitsap County, parts of uh, King and Mason counties. I was responsible for reviewing forest practices, permit applications, and also hydraulic project approval applications. So that job was visiting sites where the applicant wanted to do a project usually near a stream or in a sensitive environment, and we would look at their plans, and most often we could come up with some ideas for them to improve their project so it had less impact on the environment. So I did that, learned a lot about permits. I was hired by Seattle City Light to manage permits again for a new hydropower construction project that was near Duval, Carnation area on the South Fork Tolt. They were in those days, which would have been the early 90s, nobody was building hydro projects anymore. So it was kind of a challenge to get people to agree to this. And I did great. I kept all those 12 agencies happy with the city's project, and um, put a feather in my cap there, I guess. And then I became really interested in the other side of Seattle City, like the power side. And I made a lateral transfer from senior environmental analyst to senior power analyst. And boy, did I learn so much about our generation portfolio in the Northwest. And I think the most interesting thing to me, and which is really ringing alarm bells in my head now, is that you really need a mix of resources for various reasons to have a steady supply of electricity being delivered to your customers. And right now, I feel like there's so much confusion about intermittent power generation, like wind and solar, being being promoted for its environmental benefits, but people don't realize this very important piece, which is following the load. You know, people don't all tell you when they're going to turn on their lights. So
Right.
those operators are amazing. They are just stellar in the way that they can respond quickly with the right resources. They can respond quickly and keep the transmission lines balanced so they're not all over the place. It's just a magical thing. I'm so glad I learned about it. I wish everybody knew a little bit more about it because we're making some pretty crazy suggestions now on what to do with our power resources. Anyway, so I also earned a master's degree in public administration while I was at City Light, and I ended up retiring from Grace Harbor Public Utility District as their power manager. It was just such a lovely career. I couldn't ask for anything more interesting, and it all kind of fit together. So in answer to your original question, which was a long time ago, um, I just feel like I have a really broad understanding of Washington's resources, whether they're forests or ag lands or fish or power. I feel very well educated in those areas, and I'm a scientist. So I'm very logical. I like to solve problems and do it in a mechanical, logical way, and you know, just
Yeah.
to bring a lot of ideas together. That's who I am.
Right. No, I mean, and I think you actually really kind of answered my next question. I
Oh,
was going to talk about how, and I mentioned a little bit earlier how DNR is, a complex agency and with all the different duties, but it definitely sounds like from, the experience you just listed out there that, experience in the power sector. Of course, DNR is interested in renewable energy projects to
yeah.
generate revenue for beneficiaries. They've got the aquatic side of it. So you very clearly have aquatics background. And then just the whole fact that they are a state agency, so you know what it's like to work within and with a state agency, which sometimes I
Actually,
think is important to understand.
I think that's very important. And I'll add that I actually worked at federal agencies, state, county, and city. And my master's degree in public administration also had a lot of considerations about different levels of government and how they have different needs, and some problems are unique to some levels of government. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of how to run an agency. That was the whole focus of my degree, actually. Mhm.
Oh, okay. So let's see. Let's move on to outgoing Commissioner Franz has made a lot of her 2 terms, and then her predecessor, Commissioner Goldmark. They've worked a lot on the forest health, wildfire issues in the state, and I just was kind of wondering what vision, goals, or ideas do you have as far as like continuing or improving, shifting, whatever you have kind of around the forest health and wildfire issue.
I like how you phrased that. Um, well, when I was running for this same office in 2020, I had the opportunity to, Hillary Franz was very generous in her agreement to have Zoom debates with me. This was during COVID. So the other statewide races only got one debate per race. Hillary agreed to 8 debates with me, and I was very pleased that I had that opportunity. I could see that she was super focused on firefighting, which made sense because the fires were getting worse and worse. But I kept trying to impress on her, well, on the audience, that prevention really needed to be addressed. I mean, she was so pressed to deal with the fires. I just wanted to add the consideration of prevention would make the firefighting easier. So I came up with so many ideas, most of them very simple. And frankly, I was thinking most about early settlers or pioneers. What would they do? And they would create, they were amazing how audacious they were to just start logging these big trees. Those pictures of people that are standing on a stump that's like 7 feet across, and they've got their giant stump.
Yeah, it's a
So
whole
those
different world
people
than today.
was, yeah. So those people they developed this system of tree farming, which wasn't new in the Northwest. That had been going on around the world. So they were tree farming. They figured out how to economically log an area, transport the logs to a sawmill, get the lumber cut, and it was very practical what they were doing. So I was thinking about them and how they would, if they thought a fire was coming, they would drag a plow around a ranch to try to make a fire break. So I just started thinking in terms of fire breaks. And that's a fairly simple method to deal with limiting a fire's spread. And I just started thinking, well, we should be really promoting such things as fire breaks because these catastrophic fires, the firefighters can only fight them from behind. They can't get around in front of it because we've decommissioned so many of our roads in the forest, for one thing. And the forest for the last few years, when I looked down from an airplane, our forest would just be one blanket of trees without much of a break. So I said, let's just cut the forest into segments with fire breaks between the segments. Then you would just burn a segment instead of millions of acres. So those were the kind of simple ideas I had. And thinning out the forests as my the the preceding commissioners have done a good job of promoting ways of thinning the forest, making more room for the trees. My I became aware that these old timers who kept logging our forests, they slowed down when the northern spotted owl was listed. I actually really care about every animal. So I was hopeful that the northern spotted owl would be able to rebound from its threatened slash endangered status. But unfortunately, they're still threatened on the federal list and endangered on the state list of endangered species. I That really breaks my heart, not just for the owl's sake. Now they're being preyed upon by an East Coast owl named the barred owl, Barred, which which is competing successfully against the northern spotted owl. So that's like a whole nother subject. I might need
Oh, yeah,
an
we could
hour
spend
for
hour, 2 hours on that
that one.
conversation alone. I
Well,
will point out there's one positive thing in this spotted owl world, um, is that over on the east side of the Cascades, I won't disclose where, but the Forest Service actually did detect a nesting mating pair of spotted owls that actually reproduced,
oh,
a surviving, at least one, maybe two surviving chicks.
oh.
Now, the problem is we got to hurry up and do a whole gob of forest health treatments around where that nest is before it burns up. So,
Well,
um,
that's a good point. But having grown up at a salmon hatchery, I am a big proponent of hatcheries or some way to build populations up in an artificial environment to get them past their most vulnerable stages, which is usually when they're young. So our salmon hatcheries in the Northwest are designed just like that. They collect the eggs and the sperm. They grow those eggs till they're little fingerling fish and plant them in the river. And, a lot of people are critical of the hatchery system in the Northwest, but I happen to know through my father, who worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service for 40 years, we wouldn't even have salmon if it were not for those hatcheries. They're called mitigation hatcheries. They built them because when Bonneville Dam went in, still the lowest dam on the river, it was in the early 30s. My dad used to get really mad when he talked about this, and he never got mad, just caught my attention. He said he could not believe that they built Bonneville Dam knowing that it was going to block salmon, and they did not put in a fish ladder they even had fish elevators at that time. They didn't do anything for 10 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
the life cycle of the salmon is like 4 to 6 years. It's different for different runs, but that means that they would have decimated all the runs in 10 years. That's all it would take. You'd still have fish on the lower river, but those hatcheries really served their purpose very well. So, uh, northern spotted owls, I mean, there are bird hatcheries, and maybe that's a good idea
Yeah,
for the
might be
just
better
for
than
the
shooting
interim.
thousands of barred owls.
You know,
You know, it,
I have to admit, I have mixed feelings about that. I don't like the idea of massacring a species, but we really gave up a lot for those northern spotted owls. So I really care about them. If we gave up our whole timber industry for northern spotted owls, I think we should make sure we have a few around.
yeah. So, over, the last few years, there's been some federal authorities given to the Forest Service, and some of those, impact the state. And, I'm thinking like Good Neighbor Authority, shared stewardship. And then, of course, that relies on a certain amount of engagement with the state legislature and that kind of stuff. So, what's kind of your thoughts around Good Neighbor Authority, how you'd see you and your staff engaging with the legislature? Because, we all know, the current intent of one legislature body may not be the same 2 or 3 bienniums down the road. And even though that there's the semi promise of a lot of funding for wildfire prevention and suppression, we don't, who knows where it's going. So just kind of curious about your thoughts on, Good Neighbor and building partnerships, I guess, really within the legislature.
Um, I was starting to tell you about my experience in 2020 when I had 8 debates with Hillary Franz, and I tried to give her advice on how you could make some fairly easy, cheap, quick uh, land use changes that could prevent fires from spreading. I don't think I got to the part where in the next legislative session, 2021, there was a House Bill 1168 that I didn't know about for a while, but I found it and I read it and I thought, wow, this is great. These are the these are the things that I would like to see happen. So that was almost like a silent victory for me. I felt really good about it. But I'm aware that the legislature uh um, provided $500 million for forest treatments and for trying to fix these situations we have now that we kind of stopped managing our forest. Um, I my own my own goal, personal goal for being commissioner is that I have a very uh strong feeling about my childhood when I really believe and still believe that people were taking care of our forests. We were getting the benefit of lumber out of it. It was basically the backbone of our economy for over 100 years, and the trees still grow. They didn't stop growing. They still grow, and now they're too crowded because they were planted for harvest, and then the harvest didn't happen, so they kept growing bigger than the spot they were allocated. And what I see when I go around the state, I see, you know, clusters of trees that obviously don't have enough space to grow. Everything living needs a space to grow, whether it's a person or an ant or a tree. And our trees are too big. They're just too big and crowded. And I see the the fuel. That's why we have the fires. The trees are too big, too crowded, too much fuel. They're getting disease because they're not getting enough water or sunlight or nutrients. They compete for each other all the time. And so they burn twice as hot as our old fires from my childhood. I call the new fires white smoke fires because I learned that not only is the wood burning, the soil is burning. Minerals in the soil are being melted into crystals that go up in this white smoke. It's really, really bad. And I do not accept those fires as the new norm. So we need to thin out the trees, give the trees room to grow. If you want to keep growing them into a legacy forest, fine. But you can't just keep burning them up. That is so incredibly wrong. It makes me crazy. It's wrong in every way I can think of. It's wasteful, it's killing the soil, it's killing fish and wildlife. You're pouring fire retardant over areas of land that are going to drain into the streams. It's just wrong on so many levels. So what I would like to do, I would like to work with the legislature, but I also want to do a huge educational blitz across Washington. It's not just the DNR that can solve this. It's a really big problem. It's 35 years of not doing what we should have done. Now we have to catch up. So I want every person in Washington really to understand that we can all do something to reduce fire risk. Everybody can do something at their home. They can move their firewood pile away from their house. They can water their lawns in late August when fires might spread. There's a list. I know that the DNR has started a program to educate people about that, but I want it to be everybody, school children, you know, everybody, not truck drivers. I mean, it's like we used to have Smokey the Bear, and I'm glad he's back, but he disappeared on us for decades. And I'm glad he's back because we need everybody to understand how much risk we have taken on by by not managing forests and even agricultural land. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I really do like that message that we shouldn't be accepting that this is the new normal because in many ways, my personal opinion, humans are the ones who created this either through 100+ years of fire suppression or through that adding in lack or mismanagement over time. And if
yeah,
we created it, we certainly have a role in changing it. So
I love hearing you say that. Mhm.
so let's shift a little bit away from the forest health and wildfire side of things. As you know, DNR is responsible for being the regulatory side, implementing the state's Forest Practices Act, and and has that regulatory oversight of private and state lands and the Forest Practices Board. And I'm sure you're aware that over the last couple of years, it's become rather controversial and decisive. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are if you were to succeed as filling the role in the next turn, the next role of Commissioner of Public Lands. How you see getting these diverse groups to work together to ensure the not only the environmental protections are met, but we also maintain a viable forest product sector in the state, because that's my opinion, that's really what the forest practice rules are intended to do, is to kind of try to bring that balance.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mentioned earlier that I used to, in the early 90s, I was more more in in I don't, what word do I want? More involved in the Forest Practices Act and processes because I was was processing applications
Yeah,
under.
you actually saw it from inside what kind of
Yeah.
TFW originally was, of getting all
Yes,
the
I
different
did.
stakeholders and agencies and
Yeah.
stuff. So that does create a very unique perspective.
Yeah. And since then, I've been involved in all kinds of regulatory agencies. I'm also a landowner, a homeowner. I have to follow regulations myself, and I over time, this is my philosophical way to answer your question. When I was young, people made a lot of mistakes in environmental damages. Oh my goodness, we had so many bad things going on in the 60s and so I was just very young in the 60s, but in the 70s it was like this is why I became a biologist. I wanted to help clean up our environment. And so I had jobs where that was my passion was to help clean up our environment in Washington. Over time, though, I see how, and actually my master's degree really helped me put this more into focus. I see how we've become so many agencies with so many good intentions, and at the same time, we are limiting our focus to our little specialization more and more. I think there's far less communication between one agency and another that is similar in their scope and goals. So one thing I have personal drive to do is to kind of take stock of Washington's regulations and agencies that perform those regulations, whether it's federal, state, or even county and local, but mostly the federal and state. I think they really need to just evaluate what the goals are overall, figure out who's the most logical agency to do that kind of oversight, and just pare it down to so that the people, the property owners, are not feeling like they're bombarded from every side with rules and regulations and inspections, fines, or fees to do this or that. I mean, it really has burgeoned into a bit too much. I'm a Republican because they promote limited government, and so that's a strong philosophy that I uh, agree to. So that's one thing. I've read a little. I skipped over your question about the neighbor. What is it called?
Oh, the
The
Good Neighbor
Good
Authority.
Neighbor Authority. I didn't know much about that. I'm glad you asked that question. So I learned a little bit. I There's been a lot of news about the Good Neighbor regulations that the EPA had a ruling recently at the Supreme Court. So I know about that in terms of air pollution. But I wasn't aware that the Forest Service and state of Washington and other states uh, were were joining into these pub neighborly agreements, memorandums of agreement. I wasn't that aware of it. So I looked into it a little more. I was trying to figure out, okay, this seems like a really good idea, especially when Washington has 12% state lands and like 28% federal lands, something like that.
Hmm.
And it's kind of obvious that the federal forests are not really being managed very well lately. I've noticed places like on Blewett Pass where you can't even see a place where an elk with antlers would be able to walk between the trees. And
Hmm.
that's just not good. So I like the idea. I have some questions maybe you could answer. It looks like it's kind of a one-way cost sharing. The both the stewardship, I'm sorry, I didn't memorize their names, shared stewardship and Good Neighbor Authority. Both of those agreements seem to kind of go easy on the federal government as in terms of paying for forest treatment or um, you know, working on the lands. I don't know if
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
interpreting it,
it's
right?
I I for full disclosure, I'm a massive supporter of the Good Neighbor Authority program. Maybe in my day job, I might have actually helped write the initial legislation to create the
Nice.
revolving fund.
Okay.
And I do a lot of work with the Forest Service, but I'm probably also a little biased since I'm here in Washington and a lifelong Washingtonian, that I
Oh, I
consider
get
the
that.
state of Washington the lead in implementation of Good
Okay.
Neighbor Authority in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
But
Good.
it
Well,
is
you
it is
shared
a
that.
very good tool in getting more forest health work done on federal lands.
Mhm.
Um, I would agree with you that there are aspects of it that go easy on the Forest Service. I don't think even some of my Forest Service partners would disagree
Oh,
with me that when I'm complaining about, Good Neighbor Authority is supposed to be additional. Why are you doing your annual funded work, by passing money
oh,
and work off to
oh,
the Good Neighbor
oh,
Authority program?
oh, I see. Okay.
That's where the tension
Oh, I
comes
see.
from. But
Okay.
it's a program built in this state, by the staff involved at DNR, is a very conscientious, kind of built as you go and you have the resources. And so,
I see.
for those listening to this don't know about GNA, it's kind of a good tool because basically the program takes in either project revenue. So if they're doing timber sales, those type of things to do thinnings and those, the revenue comes in, or they can also get grant money from the federal government. The Forest Service can bring money to the table, and DNR gets fully refunded for the money that they spend doing the work. So
Oh,
it
I see.
covers all the
Okay.
staff time and all of
Oh,
that.
well, I
And
didn't learn that yet. Okay.
yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where if you just go look at anything that you just Google Good Neighbor Authority, you're not going to find all of the internal workings of it.
Right.
But
It is kind of vague.
yes,
I mean, it
exactly.
sounds like a great idea. I will say that. And it makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
Since we're all in Washington, yeah, we should work together.
yeah, and it's been very successful here, and I really, it takes buy-in from the state legislature, from and our state's a little unique in that we have a commissioner of public lands that's
Yeah,
publicly elected, whereas in
yeah,
other states it may be the governor who's the actual you know
exactly. Yeah. Isn't it only like 3 or 4 states that elect their commissioner of public
yeah,
lands?
I think it is about,
Not too
there's
many.
pretty small numbers. So but yeah, so no, it's a good program, and I think it helps the Forest Service get more done around forest health, and you
Benefits
know
everybody.
and it's probably one of those areas that honestly, unless you reach the polar ends of the spectrum in the forest policy forest operations world, so either those that are so far left they never want to cut a tree, or those that are so far right that want to cut every tree,
Mhm.
everybody else kind of, at least all of us kind of that I consider more in the middle, we're all pretty supportive of Good Neighbor Authority. So it's been a good useful tool for the state, and helping hopefully reduce, well, haven't seen too much wildfire smoke yet this year, so
Yeah,
hopefully we can
no,
take a little
everybody,
credit.
yeah, okay. Well, I'm so glad you asked that question so I could do the research and that you augmented my learning there. Thank you for that.
You're very
Yeah,
welcome.
makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you have almost 30% of your state is Forest Service or federal, we do have to partner with them. And
Well,
they're
yeah, and it's weird when you find a program that most Republicans and most Democrats agree on. You got to
that's
scratch your head and go, wait a minute, somebody
good
must have
thing.
actually come up with a good idea, because there's, the 80% in the middle are in agreement. Something must be working here. So, that 10% on either end of the spectrum, they can go do what they want to do. But, we're doing good things for the larger society. So,
I love it. Yeah.
um, we'll shift to a kind of another arm of DNR, which is of course the state trust lands, and the DNR has a trust manager duty, and fiduciary obligation to define beneficiaries. And there's been of course, a lot of controversy in that world lately as well. And I was kind of wondering what your thoughts are on one, kind of ensuring the undivided loyalty to the trust beneficiaries, and what kind of message you might send to the beneficiaries to assure them of your commitment in this role to them, and then also what message you might have to send to the DNR state land staff to help boost morale. Because I will tell you, they're hardworking, professional, you know, natural resources managers out there. But man, when you're getting beat up every day by people telling you you're doing it wrong, it can be,
Oh,
it can be depressing. So,
thank
just kind of
you.
curious about, your thoughts on that and the commitment to the beneficiaries, and also how to kind of, your thoughts of what might help boost the morale of the staff.
Hmm. Well, again, I think my master's degree in public administration gave me some ideas about how to manage people, to motivate them and make them feel fulfilled in their work. Work to me was a huge identity thing. I loved all these different jobs I had. It built my character and my relationships with others. That was probably the most important thing to me, that I could work with other people and find out their thoughts and their ways of doing things. I've had some really great experiences, especially at Seattle City Light. It wasn't the environmental side, it was the power management side of City Light that had individuals from all over the world. Amazingly, we had people from Thailand, South Africa, everywhere, pretty much everywhere. It was a big group. It was really fun. So I love to learn from others, and I think we all benefit from doing that. Let's see, your first question though was about the trust lands. The I'm familiar with our state constitution, which created this position to fulfill that goal of earning revenues from natural resources for the public institutions like schools. Our paramount duty, the schools and the hospitals, libraries. I would imagine over the time that we've been a state, probably this position always had to negotiate where the money's going. I know that some of the trust lands have their own equations for that. They're going to get money from this source or that source, but um, the universities, except not the University of Washington for some reason, I guess.
No, the University of Washington does get some revenue.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Yes. There's kind of a long history there. A lot of their lands were divested from, and then they kind of figured out how bad of a decision that was, and then there were
Oh,
new lands purchased.
okay. I didn't know about that last part. Okay. There's a lot I need to learn about
Oh,
the DNR. It's got quite a
yeah.
history. So that's the kind of thing I'll be learning. But I think when our Constitution specifies the whole purpose of this position is to earn revenues off natural resources, I really take that seriously. I think that has to be in the job description. I
Okay.
know that some people are suing Hillary Friends for having timber sales on state lands. I don't see how that can be um, argued very effectively against the Constitution, what it says very specifically. So I don't know really how that's going to go. Um, but I am very much in favor of earning revenues off the public lands because I see that as the job in the beginning. It's got a lot more layers on it now, but um, that was your first part of your question. And then
Then, kind of what would you tell the beneficiaries to kind of assure them of your commitment to them?
well, what I just said, I take that as the most serious job of the Commissioner of Public Lands because that is what's in the Constitution, that's their job. I don't know how I would estimate the amount of revenues that can be made as, you know, we have less public land than we did in 1889 that the state owns. So I'm not sure how that equation works. I will learn and try to figure it out.
Okay. And then just kind of lastly, the the message to staff to kind of help boost
Oh
their
yeah.
morale because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
getting arrows shot at them from the outside, and so it's always a little challenging, if
Yeah.
when you take pride in your work and you identify as a forester and a professional, when
Mhm.
people are questioning the validity of your work, that can you know lead to morale issues. And just kind of curious how you see addressing morale issues within a staff.
Well, generally speaking, I think I mentioned I grew up next to the Gifford Pinchot Forest, and all my friends were loggers' kids. So I grew up in a culture of forestry. That's what we did. That's what we lived. I totally admire people who work in the forest. I know it's difficult work. I know that it's hard labor sometimes. You do get to be out in the wilderness, which I would love, but I totally respect people who do that kind of work. I'm not kidding. Even a lot of my friends in high school left high school and started working with those families, same families that have been working in the woods for generations. It's a real honorable tradition in my heart. So that's for starters. But also, I think of myself as being quite accepting of other people. I like to get to know people, which is why I love campaigning. That's the best part of running a campaign. I love people. And I've been through a few hard knocks. I've had a lot of counseling. I'm pretty good at helping understand myself and others. I mean, that's people are fascinating. We all come with our own history that needs to kind of work together with other people's history. And I think it's fascinating, really, and rewarding to get to know people.
Well, I think you might have touched on one of the most important parts, and that's really probably getting out to get to know people and get to know the staff.
Oh, yeah.
I think former Commissioner Doug Sutherland many years ago was probably one of the best commissioners that I'm aware of, of doing that, of actually getting
What?
out and getting to know his staff. I mean, it's a big staff,
Really?
so it's
Well,
not
it is
easy, but
staff, but I've already met thousands of people in my campaign, and I try to remember all their names. I really do. I miss a few, but I really enjoy other people. I'm just one. I'm just one
mhm.
person, and I like to know what other people think and like to do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I can build good relationships because I enjoy that.
All right. And then lastly, of course, there's the customers. And so just kind of curious about your thoughts around, because not only are the customers important to the revenue to the state lands, but oftentimes they're the economic engines in some of these communities. And so just kind of what are some of your ideas to, you know, ensure, or steps you can take to ensure these economic engines keep working?
I might I might ask you for a little clarification when you say customers. Are you talking about the people who want to use recreation areas? Are you talking
I'm
about
I'm
uh,
talking about the sawmills, the loggers, the people who
oh,
buy DNR timber.
oh yeah,
Really,
yeah.
you could even add in the farmers that lease,
Oh yeah, yeah.
state
Okay.
ag lands,
Oh,
all those type of things
I
that,
see.
kind
Yeah,
of generate the economic activity within,
yeah.
the more rural communities.
Well, I told you I grew up in Skamania County. I went to did I tell you about my grade school yet? I went to a 4-room grade school. There were 8 kids in each class,
Oh,
including
wow.
mine. and it's called Mill A School. It sounds French if you say it fast. Mill A.
Yes, I was actually in Mill A few weeks ago.
You were?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, I loved that school. The whole county of Skamania would get school taxes paid on every timber sale. So when I was growing up, that was a very, very wealthy county. And the timber harvest, basically, I think I should make people happier because I want to recreate our timber industry. And that should help everybody, including the trees that are stressed out right now. So I want to share with you that Mill A School, maybe you know this if you were just there. It used to be fully funded, and now the parents have to pay half of the cost to operate this school in a
Oh,
public
wow.
school district. That's how bad it affects me personally because these are my friends who can't even have a living like their parents did. Um, Having the timber industry go away like it has, it makes absolutely no sense to me. We have Washington is so incredibly rich in natural resources that are renewable. And our ancestors knew that. They figured it out and they figured out how to be good stewards of the land and also get some income out of it. I mean, that's kind of the definition of this job in my mind,
Yeah.
that you learn how to manage things without causing damages and our I'm a Christian. I became a better Christian the more I learned about biology, and I'm at the point in my life where I can't believe how amazing our world is. So I have faith in nature to repair our little mistakes. We got to be careful about the big mistakes, but nature's pretty good about repairing when we do something that wasn't very smart.
Yeah.
So I really feel that we could all benefit greatly from a renaissance of the timber industry. I think it just makes total sense for our state. We have all these resources. And in fact, I really, if you're concerned about climate change, these smoke fires that we've had for 10 years now, I don't see any data on this, but I'm pretty sure, pretty suspicious, I should say, that those clouds of smoke coming from these catastrophic hot, hot, hot fires, I've seen satellite pictures, those clouds go all the way to Kansas and they just hang in the air. It's so reminiscent of Mount St. Helens blowing. It's like, this is just, how can we be doing this to ourselves? It's crazy. And those clouds are probably causing way more climate change than they are being caused by climate. So that's my feeling on all the reasons why we really just need to revamp our view of timber and grazing and agriculture, water. You know, I want to add one thing. This is an interesting, you probably know this rule of thumb, a forester's rule of thumb that I learned about. A tree is just generally speaking, a tree living and healthy uses about 10 gallons of water per inch of trunk diameter. So like a 30-inch wide diameter trunk, 4 feet off the ground. That tree is it's gonna require about 300 gallons of water just to stay alive. And I look around me at how many really big trees we have now. And I think about the water is, we have low stream flows in some of our salmon streams. And I think, well, maybe that watershed needs a little more thinning of the big trees so that that water goes down into the aquifer and ends up in the creek. So I think a lot about how everything is interconnected and we really need to get the balance right again. And when we do, I'm not against prescribed burns, but we also just have to really focus on the space that trees have to grow in. That's kind of the bottom line in my mind. And that
Right.
will improve uh, the health of the forest, and it'll reduce the fire risks. It'll probably let more water go down into where it's supposed to be. And we build a few roads we won't have to fly over all the time with that fire retardant. I just want to take better care of everything.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been great. I want to give you a chance. Anything else you want to add or cover before we wrap up?
Well, I one thing I'll add is that what it feels so arrogant to say when I'm the commissioner of public lands. I'd like to be your commissioner of public lands, and I would also focus on energy quite a bit because I have a background in that from my work experience, and I have some definite opinions about the need for more long-range planning. We really need to, I mean, it's a little scary to me that we're talking about uh, reducing or eliminating residential natural gas. That doesn't really buy you anything because those homes will still have to be heated unless you're not going to provide heat. You'll probably have to run electricity, and you're you're lowering the capacity of the electric grid by getting rid of all that natural gas. The, people don't seem
Mm-hmm.
to realize those energy sources work together in a beautiful way that's been developed over, you know, decades, and you can't just change it the way they're thinking they can. I don't. It really people need a lot more information before they make decisions like that.
Yeah. Well, I think you would probably find some allies in the beneficiaries when it comes to energy production and its nexus to DNR being able to support ways to generate revenue through energy production. So,
Okay. Okay, that's good to know.
yeah.
It's been great talking with you, Matt. Thank you very much.
Yes, well, thank you for joining me today, and I wish you luck, and we'll see what happens. Perhaps maybe will be a future episode with you as commissioner. We don't know. We'll see.
I hope to get through the primary, if that's what you mean.
Yes, yep. Oh, I know it's still a long ways to go.
It
So
is, there are days. It
yes,
feels really long, but so far so good.
yeah. All right.
Thank
Well, thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Matt. Good to see you.
Good to see you.